In the icy, wind-swept expanse of the North Atlantic on the night bridging May 4 and 5, 1943, a dramatic confrontation unfolded that would quietly reshape the course of World War II. 43 merchant ships, lumbering under the weight of vital cargo, food, fuel, raw materials, and munitions, plodded westward from Liverpool toward Halifax in a formation known as Convoy ONS-5. Escorting this precious lifeline were a mere 16 warships, corvettes and destroyers mostly, bobbing like corks in the heavy seas. The convoy moved at the pace of its slowest vessel, perhaps 8 knots, a crawling target in an ocean that had become a hunting ground for the German Kriegsmarine's most feared predators, the U-boats. Over 40 of these submarines, sleek gray wolves of steel, converged in the darkness, their commanders salivating at the prospect of a slaughter. They had the numbers, nearly 30 attack boats against 16 escorts, and the element of surprise, or so they believed. For 3 years, U-boats had operated with near impunity on the surface at night, invisible to the crude British radars of the era, faster than most escorts, and armed with the Metox receiver that chirped warnings whenever Allied radar swept their way. This should have been a massacre. Instead, it became a disaster for the attackers. By dawn, 6 U-boats lay on the ocean floor, their crews entombed in twisted metal, while 7 more limped away so damaged they might never fight again. The convoy lost 13 ships, a heavy but survivable toll. The Germans had thrown their best punch and come away bloodied. This was no fluke, it was the opening act of a month that would shatter the U-boat arm and save Britain from starvation. To understand why this night mattered, step back to the broader war at sea. From 1939 to early 1943, the Battle of the Atlantic was Germany's best chance to strangle the United Kingdom. Britain, an island nation, imported nearly everything: wheat from Canada, oil from the Caribbean, iron ore from Sweden, meat from Argentina. Cut the sea lanes, and the country would collapse within months. Admiral Karl Donitz, the architect of U-boat strategy, understood this perfectly. His submarines operated in wolf packs, groups of 6 to 20 boats that shadowed a convoy by day, submerged and silent, then surfaced after dark to strike in coordinated frenzy. They torpedoed ships, vanished into the night, and repositioned ahead of the convoy to attack again. The escorts, equipped with Aztec sonar that worked underwater but was nearly useless against surface targets, and radars that emitted long 1.5-meter waves too coarse to pick out a low silhouette conning tower against wave clutter, were often outmaneuvered. The Metox receiver, introduced in 1942, gave U-boats a crucial edge. It detected the pulse of British radar emissions up to 15 kilometers away, allowing captains to crash dive before aircraft or ships closed in. Night after night, month after month, the tonnage sank. In March 1943 alone, U-boats sent 82 Allied merchant vessels to the bottom, totaling 476,000 gross tons. Britain's fuel reserves dwindled to 3 months' supply, food stocks hit emergency levels. Cabinet minutes record grim discussions: could the war even continue if losses persisted at this rate? German shipyards, meanwhile, churned out submarines at a blistering pace, 20 new boats commissioned every month. With 240 operational U-boats by May, 118 at sea at any given time. And losses averaging fewer than 10 per month, the arithmetic favored Berlin. Sink ships faster than the Allies could build them, and victory was inevitable, yet cracks were appearing in the German edifice, subtle at first, noticed only by the men who lived and died in the pressure hulls. Take Kapitänleutnant Werner Hartenstein, commander of U-515, one of the Kriegsmarine's deadliest aces. Between February 1942 and April 1944, he would sink 23 ships totaling over 140,000 tons, a record that earned him the Knight's Cross with oak leaves. In late April 1943, off the coast of West Africa, he attacked convoy TS-37 with devastating effect, sinking 7 vessels in a single 12-hour spree using new magnetic influence torpedoes that detonated beneath keels. It was a triumph. But during that same patrol, something unnerving occurred. A British destroyer materialized out of the gloom without a peep from Hartenstein's Metox set. The receiver, designed to scream when British 1.5-meter radar swept the area, remained mute until the enemy was close enough to open fire with deck guns. Hartenstein ordered an emergency dive, the boat plunging beneath the waves as shells splashed around the conning tower. They escaped, but the incident gnawed at him. In his patrol log, he noted that Allied radar seemed to be operating on frequencies the METOX could not detect. Back at the U-boat base in Lorient, France, technicians tore apart the METOX unit. It tested perfectly against known British wavelengths. The official explanation: operator error under combat stress. Hartenstein was not convinced, he was not alone. Across the fleet, seasoned commanders reported similar anomalies. Aircraft appeared overhead at night with impossible precision, dropping flares and depth charges before any radar warning sounded. Escorts homed in on submerged U-boats with depth charge patterns that adjusted mid-attack, as if the hunters could see every evasive turn. Corvettenkapitän Eric Topp, who had sunk 35 ships before retiring to a training command in September 1942, stayed in touch with active captains and heard the stories. By early May, U-boat headquarters in Paris had compiled 17 separate incidents where detection occurred without METOX alerts. A pattern was undeniable. Something fundamental had changed in Allied capabilities. German intelligence, however, had no answers. Radio intercepts revealed nothing. Captured equipment from downed aircraft showed only the familiar 1.5-meter radar sets. Agents in Britain reported no unusual activity. The naval staff faced a dilemma: either the METOX receivers were failing in ways undetectable during bench tests, or the British had developed a radar system operating on wavelengths German engineers had long dismissed as impractical. Centimetric radar, waves shorter than 50 centimeters, required power outputs and components that German science deemed unachievable in operational equipment. The staff chose the comforting explanation: faulty receivers. Admitting the alternative would mean acknowledging that German research was years behind, that every tactical doctrine needed rewriting. That was too radical a shift based on anecdotal reports. What the Germans could not know was that the breakthrough had already happened, quietly, in a laboratory far from the front lines. On February 1940, at the University of Birmingham, physicists John Randall and Harry Boot unveiled the cavity magnetron, a device no larger than a coffee mug that would revolutionize radar. Previous vacuum tubes generated microwatts at centimetric wavelengths, the magnetron produced hundreds of watts. Later scaled to 10 kilowatts in production models. At its heart was a solid copper block, 8 centimeters in diameter and 6 tall, machined with 8 resonant cavities around a central cathode. When high voltage was applied, electrons spiraled in a magnetic field, passing each cavity and stimulating synchronized microwave oscillations at 3000 MHz, 10 centimeters wavelength. This was 50 times more powerful than any prior source at such short waves. By June 1940, the General Electric Company in Britain had refined sealed magnetrons suitable for airborne use. The implications were staggering. Short wavelengths meant narrow beams, high resolution, and the ability to detect small targets like a submarine's conning tower or periscope against sea clutter. The first application was H-2S, a ground mapping radar for bombers. But in early 1943, with U-boat losses threatening national survival, Prime Minister Winston Churchill intervened personally. On March 25, briefed on the catastrophic March sinkings, he summoned Air Chief Marshal Sir Philip Joubert of Coastal Command. Joubert explained that his pilots had begged for H-2S derivatives for over a year, but Bomber Command under Arthur Harris hoarded production for night raids on Germany. Churchill overruled Harris without hesitation. The Atlantic was the priority. Without supply lines, Britain would fall long before bombers could cripple German industry. He ordered 20% of all H-2S magnetrons diverted immediately to maritime patrol aircraft. The result was ASV Mark III, entering service on March 17 aboard Wellington bombers. The system weighed 90 kilograms, magnetron transmitter, rotating antenna under the fuselage, sensitive receiver, 2 cathode ray tube displays, and power supplies. A dedicated operator scanned the screens, calling out contacts. It was finicky, magnetrons burned out after 40 to 60 hours, antennas jammed in humid air, tubes failed from vibration, but when operational, it was lethal. A surfaced U-boat showed as a bright blip from 16 kilometers, a periscope from 8 meters, tuned only to 1.5-meter waves, heard nothing. A submarine needed 30 seconds to dive to safe depth, an aircraft closing at 200 knots covered a kilometer in 15 seconds. Escape was impossible. The first confirmed kill came on March 22 in the Bay of Biscay. A 172 Squadron Wellington detected U-665 on the surface at night. The Metox crew heard no warning. The bomber swooped to 300 meters and released 6 depth charges in a tight pattern. The U-boat survived but was mangled, forced to abort and crawl home. Over the next 6 weeks, ASV Mark III equipped aircraft sank 11 U-boats and damaged 23 more, nearly all without prior detection. German commanders, baffled, attributed the attacks to visual spotting or sheer luck. Intelligence officers interrogated survivors, dissected wreckage, and pored over reports. Nothing explained the phenomenon. Metox sets functioned normally on test benches. British radar emissions, when intercepted, remained on familiar frequencies. Then a rumor circulated, seeded deliberately by British intelligence. Captured aircrew, briefed before every mission, told interrogators that Coastal Command homed on the Metox receivers themselves. Superheterodyne sets emitted faint signals at their intermediate frequency of 455 kHz. Specialized direction-finding gear, the story went, could detect these leaks from 90 kilometers. German engineers confirmed that Metox did radiate weakly, detectable at 2 kilometers with sensitive equipment. 90 kilometers strained credibility, requiring 50 decibels more sensitivity and massive antennas, but it aligned with known physics. The alternative, centimetric radar, violated every assumption of German research. On August 3, Donitz issued an emergency order: switch off all Metox sets immediately. Better to operate blind than to broadcast position, the order was catastrophic. Many British aircraft still used older 1.5-meter ASV radars. Metox could have warned against those. Against ASV Mark III, it was useless either way. Shutting it down stripped U-boats of their only partial defense. Losses accelerated. Convoy ONS-5, the battle that opened May, exemplified the new reality. 43 U-boats sank 13 merchants but lost 6 boats and saw 7 crippled, 15% of the Wolf Pack neutralized. Mid-May's Convoy SC-128 was worse, 17 attackers sank nothing. Lost 5, and saw 4 damaged. Late May's Convoy SC-130 delivered the personal blow. Donitz's 21-year-old son Peter served as watch officer aboard U-954. On May 19, a British frigate detected the boat with sonar and pummeled it with depth charges. No survivors. The admiral, devastated, demanded a full review. The numbers were merciless. In May alone, 41 U-boats were sunk, 25% of the operational fleet, 37 more damaged and sidelined for months. In exchange, submarines sank 58 Allied merchants worldwide, only 34 in the Atlantic. German yards could replace hulls, but not crews. Most losses were veteran commanders, men who read the sea instinctively. Who knew when to press an attack and when to vanish. Their replacements, fresh from 12-week courses at Plön or Gotenhafen, were technically proficient but lacked combat intuition. The U-boat force was hemorrhaging its institutional memory. On May 24, Donitz made the hardest decision of his career. He signaled every boat in the Atlantic: withdraw from convoy routes, return to base, suspend offensive operations indefinitely. In his war diary, he wrote of facing the greatest crisis in submarine warfare, of enemy location devices rendering combat impossible. He did not know what those devices were, only that his submarines could no longer function. The offensive that had sunk 300 Allied ships, 11 million tons, and killed 30,000 merchant seamen was over. Churchill had called the U-boat peril the only thing that truly frightened him. A 10-centimeter radar system, deployed in secret, ended the threat. belated countermeasures arrived too late. On September 4, the Naxos receiver reached bases, tuned to 2,500 to 3,750 MHz. It detected ASV Mark III at 8 km, enough to dive, but plagued by false alarms from distant ships or aircraft. By then, Allied air cover had transformed. Very long-range B-24 Liberators closed the mid-Atlantic air gap, escort carriers sailed with convoys, hunter-killer groups prowled independently, using centimetric radar and improved sonar to seek rather than merely defend. American aircraft from Brazil and the Caribbean wielded A/APS-2, functionally identical to ASV Mark III. U-boats experimented with anti-aircraft guns, ordering crews to fight on the surface. Aircraft, faster and more heavily armed, destroyed gun crews from beyond effective range. Operations shifted to the Indian Ocean, South Atlantic, Caribbean, anywhere escorts might be thinner. Centimetric radar followed everywhere, the tactical landscape had inverted. For 3 years, U-boats relied on surface speed, 17 knots versus 7 submerged. Centimetric radar detected surfaced boats as easily at night as in daylight. Submarines spent most patrols underwater, having range and slashing speed. Type VIC boats carried battery banks that lasted 90 minutes at flank speed, 80 hours at 4 knots. Recharging required 4 to 6 hours on the surface, running diesels, prime time for radar detection. The cycle was vicious: submerge to hide, exhaust batteries, surface to recharge, risk detection, dive again, drain power faster evading. Patrols became endurance tests in evasion, not hunting. Effectiveness plummeted. By late 1943, loss rates exceeded 50%, many boats were sunk on their maiden voyage before reaching operational areas. Average lifespan collapsed from over a year in 1942 to under 3 months in 1944. New crews, trained in 12 weeks, mastered procedures but not survival. Doctrine, refined through years of success, was obsolete. Headquarters, still groping for answers, could offer no coherent guidance. Werner Hartenstein's end came on April 9, 1944. U-515, operating off North Africa, was spotted by an aircraft from the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal. Depth charges and destroyer gunfire followed. 16 crew died, 44, including Hartenstein, were captured. He later died attempting escape from a POW camp in Virginia. Donitz, tried at Nuremberg, never fully grasped the magnetron's role. He cited improved Allied training, more escorts, better weapons, closed air gaps, centimetric radar as one factor among many. Post-war Coastal Command statistics told the truth. From March to July 1943, ASV Mark III accounted for 37 sinkings and 49 serious damages, over half the period's U-boat losses. German records from May brim with references to mysterious detection methods. The Berlin series radar, developed from a captured magnetron in early 1943, reached submarines in late 1944, too late for anything but weather reporting. The numbers seal the narrative. March 1943, 82 merchants sunk, 12 U-boats lost, 7-1 in Germany's favor. April, 39 ships, 15 submarines, 2.5-1. May, 34 ships, 41 submarines, Allies ahead. Thereafter, the ratio never favored U-boats again. By 1944, 5 patrols yielded 1 merchant. The offensive that nearly won the war was broken in a single month by a wavelength German receivers could not hear. This was not a story of sweeping maneuvers or heroic charges. It was a tale of asymmetry, of a modest vacuum tube, 8 cavities in copper, deployed at the precipice of defeat, in utter secrecy. The cavity magnetron was no superweapon, merely an engineering leap that generated shorter waves with greater power. Yet because Britain possessed it, and Germany remained ignorant, it rewrote the Atlantic. Wars turn on such hinges: a laboratory insight, a prime ministerial decree, a disinformation whisper. The U-boat menace, weeks from victory, was extinguished not by fleets but by pulses of 10-centimeter radiation echoing back from steel holes in the night. Britain endured. America's arsenals flowed unchecked. The Allies marched toward Berlin. All because, in the spring of 1943, the hunters finally saw in the dark.